What is truly your 100 day? Output wise, attitude wise, all the things. What is your 100? Because if you can get to 85% of your 100, 85% of the time, you're going to do gangbusters things. But a lot of people will spend so much time contemplating what good could look like that they never figure out what their 100 is.
This is BizNinja Entrepreneur Radio with your host, Tyler Jorgenson.
Welcome out to BizNinja Entrepreneur Radio. I am your host, Tyler Jorgenson, and today I have somebody coming in who has been introduced to me as corporate America's Mr. Rogers. And as a big Mr. Rogers fan and de facto member of the Church of Rogers, that excites me. And I'm really excited to get to know Timm Chiusano, and welcome out to the show.
Thanks for having me on, man. This is a treat. I'm excited for the chat.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get more into your nickname, but I want to know when in your life, when was that moment where you first realized that you were an entrepreneur?
Still figuring it out.
Yeah.
I don't even know that I would consider myself one right now, even though technically I am. For the first time in my adult life, I'm working for myself. We are now 22 months into that journey.
Okay.
25 years before that, I was in corporate America. I feel like I probably always had some entrepreneurial ideas, thoughts, suggestions in my head, but was never brave enough and thought that the word was beyond what my skill set might have been able to bring to the table. And it just came down to a very bizarre set of circumstances that put me on the path to being that technically as somebody running their own business in a one-man band with multiple business verticals, trying to do all the things, figuring out new business models, inventing new products. And it's been a blast. But to answer your question, I'd say I'm still figuring that part out.
Now, that makes a ton of sense. And I think as I've asked that question, 90% of the time it's people that are like, I was just since I was a kid. Like I knew it from day one. And the other side is maybe came more from your path where they did the corporate ladder. They built that way. However, a lot of your experience was in producing live events, marketing, which to me are very entrepreneurial, creator-driven roles. So did you feel that you were drawn to roles that allowed you to be entrepreneurial, maybe within organizations?
It's almost like I'm getting way too much credit than I deserve in that regard. If I even tried to say yes to that, dude, I wanted jobs that I could sink my teeth into and ones where I could grow and places where there was opportunity to leave a mark on things. I don't know that I was ever smart enough to look at it in that way to think, oh, well, this allows me to do X, Y, and Z from a skill set perspective. And therefore this kind of scratches the itch, even though it's technically in a corporate environment. It was leaving school without a degree, fumbling my way through 4 part-time jobs to be in a position where I could get a full-time job before somebody figured out that I didn't have a college degree, sticking in that for as long as they would have me, transitioning careers once I got married and realized that all of the live sport events would mean 36 weeks of travel a year, and that's not conducive for the kind of marriage that I wanted to have. And then fell backwards into a bit of a larger role from there, and then fell even further backwards into social media stuff. So honestly, I still feel like, and I'm sure this is probably the only comment that thread throughout, is that I just still feel very attached to the 17, 24-year-old dumbass inside me who wanted to figure things out, wanted to do things that were as creative as possible, but could leave an impact for the right reasons. And it just happened to be that for the most part that meant, or for the entire part up until 22 months ago, that meant that there was a check in the mail every other week and it came from a very big company.
Yeah. That's a big shift, right? So it's scary enough to start your own thing, to go out on your own. It's another level of fear when you've got to leave behind a decent size comp package, right? So you're internet famous, right? You've got over 1 million followers on TikTok. You got, over 500,000 on Instagram. You've got reach across other platforms, which is always great to see that you're figuring out the flywheel. What was that first big win on social? And was it a big enough early win that you thought maybe this is possible?
It depends on how you define early win. I would define early win as the handful of comments I got that said, "You make growing up less scary," which all of a sudden gave me a window into the relevance of what I was doing. Not just necessarily like, cool, somebody's doing some interesting stuff on a social media platform and it's getting views and clicks, etc. That there was some sort of impact that I was unintentionally leaving. And with trust comes value, right? And so I think that first inkling into people want to hear what I have to say simply because I've been there and done things. And if I pay that forward the right way, it can potentially mean really good things for all of us. And that was the less than scientific business model that led to where we are today. So like the first one was comments that told me what I didn't know, which was this is relevant and this is helpful. I would say the next big win was when brands started to lean in and they're like, hey, do you want to do some stuff? Mm. And then because of the background that I had at ESPN, it was very easy, right? Mm. Cool. Yeah, of course. I got Dyson vacuums. I got all kinds of weird ideas. Like, let's pretend that the robot vacuum is somebody who's applying to be a new, housemate in my home. And just thinking about things very differently as somebody with the unfair advantage of having been a marketing executive in a traditional space for a very long time. I could think about things both from the creator lens, but also from, well, what is the C-level person on their side going to think about this? They're going to look at what's the ROI? Why are we doing this? What did it cost? How long did it take? All that kind of good stuff. So I could see it from both sides. So the corroboration of the value in the content in general, the first couple of brands that were like, hey, do you want to do something? And I realized very quickly, like, oh, wait a minute, like this is a totally different world when I'm not doing it for a company. When I'm doing it independently, I can kind of let my biggest ideas fly, and I know I can hit the mark exactly where a brand needs it, but also do it in an unexpected way that they could have never put in a brief, right? The idea is they're like, oh, wow, this is why we come to you. And the last thing I'll say is, because I think that this was one of the most important things that I did and something that I tell other people, and they're like, well, how did you know it's time to leave? And how would you be comfortable making that jump and leaving the biweekly check, etc.? I made myself a value pyramid. So I did this brain dump of what are all of the things that I do that I could sell? And that was from the highest level of things like I could work with a company to be an executive recruiter based off of my own experience to come in. I'm also a double certified emotional intelligence coach. So it's like, okay, I could help people with executive recruiting. I could go in and I could emotional intelligence coach departments, teams, or companies. I could do that one-to-one. There's the content, there's the brand ideas, there's et cetera. Just did a full brain dump. And then I listed them from the thing that would be probably have the smallest pool of people that would buy it, but would be the most expensive. So like the executive recruiting stuff probably, to what is the thing that has the biggest reach that I should be doing for free. And when I looked at that value pyramid, then I was like, okay, cool. This is not just one thing. This isn't like, hey, leap of faith, let's see if I can make TikTok ads until my mid-50s and see what happens. It's like, no, I know that I can build at least 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 different potential verticals for myself. And if 3 of them fall over, then I still got the other 4. And so it was a combination of those things. But I think if it didn't happen in that sequence, it never would have happened overall. Because I don't know that I've ever had the faith, if those first handful of followers didn't say, you make growing up less scary, that I would have been in a position to be like, oh, there's something behind this that matters more than I may have ever thought that this could matter. And therefore the value and the trust that I can build would give me a foundation that I can then build other things on top of if I'm smart about. But if that first part doesn't happen, I don't think the rest of it does.
Yeah, I love the perspective on that, and the strategic nature, right? It wasn't well, we're just going to jump and figure it out. It was like, no, I have multiple pillars. If one falls apart, I'm good. A lot of your work is around helping people be kinder to themselves, and so your certifications in emotional intelligence, your ebook around doing your best work and finding happiness. I think this stuff is really important. We live in a time where I feel like people are becoming more and more disconnected, not only from each other, but from themselves. They're numb, they're doom scrolling, right? And so it's such this battle of, well, I'm going to be another voice, but why is this voice meaningful, right? How am I going to help people? And so where do you find your inspiration and how do you manage that balance?
It's a great question. I mean, the inspiration just comes from being alive every day, right? Just like super cheesy, straightforward, but cool. Like, let's do it again. We get the opportunity to. I'm feel good enough to be able to get up and go for a run or go to the gym, and my kid's doing well, all things considered, for a 13-year-old girl who's got all kinds of schoolwork and social pressures around her, and things are, thank God, in a really solid place with my wife, relationship wise, over like all the things that you just could be, that I think in times can be taken for granted. So I think just number one, the motivation comes from like, I get to do this again one more time today. Let's do it. But then from the opportunity, I pull back to the experience of all the things that I saw and all the times from like, why are we making this so hard on ourselves, right? Especially when you just think about corporate America at large. It's 30-ish million people, depending on how you rank how you would describe what corporate America exactly means, but it's about 30 million people. And it always just boggled my mind that we couldn't literally make it more fun and easier for each other, right? Everyone's like, I've got the Sunday scaries. I'm like, cool, I had them too. I had the everyday scaries for years. But we do it to ourselves, right? It's people, like, we're people that are in the same company that are like, okay, maybe one's on the marketing team and the other one's on the finance team or the product team. And they're doing it to each other, right? And so trying to rally the larger group to be as comfortable and confident in their own skin as humanly possible, to make sure that they're kind to themselves first and foremost, so that it's easier to deal with those other people around them, and then hopefully then influence those other people to then be calmer and more kind, etc. And then on top of that, if we can then get especially the healthy skeptics out there that are like, what does this all mean? Why are we doing this? Like, what does corporate America even mean these days? And like, where are we going with all of it? In my humble opinion, there's 10,000 people out there that have the best chance of changing the world in the most substantial of ways over the next 20, 30 years. And they're probably in their late 20s right now that will become the top 20 at the Fortune 500 companies, and will probably have more control than most governments, right? Because they can, in the blink of an eye, be like, cool, here's what our minimum wage is. Here's what we're doing from an environmental impact perspective. Here's what we're doing relative to maternity leave and paternity leave and all those like kinds of things that just add up to quality of life. So, but it starts with yourself, right? You have to be more comfortable. You have to be kinder to yourself. You have to be able to give yourself a bit of a break, and then be able to appreciate the differences in others. And so I really lean into that, because I firmly believe the success that I had during my corporate stay was largely built on my ability to, what I say in that document, which is get people to do their best work by being the best version of themselves. That will, in my humble opinion, supersede any KPI or goal or bullshit thing that you can put on a poster on the wall if it doesn't mean anything. But if you can get people to be the best version of themselves, not change, but just be the best version of themselves, then you can do some pretty cool things out there and be happier too.
Yeah. One of the challenges I always give to myself, right, is when I'm faced with a decision, it's what would the best version of myself do in this situation, right? Because sometimes we're
I love
tired,
that.
or we're other, we have other, factors. And so I'm like, okay, if I ignore all of those and if I was at 100 today, what would I do? I try to remember that. I think emotional intelligence is so important. Forever we've talked about IQ, but EQ has become more and more frontline. And I have 4 kids ranging 16 to 21, and so I have a perspective on this age where I actually think this generation is more self-aware than any of my generation or my parents' generation. What trends are you seeing in emotional intelligence that are good or that you're concerned with?
I would say I'm so happy to hear you say that. I'm seeing an inkling of that. I think at 13 it's still too early to like really get a sense of, especially for her peers. I mean, my daughter I see all the time, so I've got a different gauge on her self-awareness, which thankfully is will corroborate what you said, where I think it's at a pretty high level, all things considered. But I would say that the trend is we're at a bit of a crossroads where, in my humble opinion, self-awareness is one of the biggest contributing factors to long-term success or potentially plummeting in your career. Right? I think it's why people will get to a space and then they just plateau. I think it's why some people end up making catastrophic mistakes. But those that are self-aware, I think that they can navigate through all of it and have the best long-term potential to be successful as humanly possible. I do think that the younger generations are more self-aware overall because they seemingly have a different take on what success looks like versus some of the previous generations. And they feel like, at least from what I've seen, that they can kind of reinvent that, oh, well, you're supposed to check all of these life boxes and get to this space and then you retire, like this is how it goes, versus saying, well, no, well, like what's the impact that I'm going to have and how happy am I going to be when I'm doing all these things, and do I really need all that stuff? And I think just even asking those questions will start them on a path, and has started them on a path, to being more aware of then what they bring to the table themselves and their potential impact. And for better or worse, it might be one of the positive outcomes of social media being as pervasive as it is that you're either, if you're making content, you're then like literally having to watch yourself on a consistent basis. And if you have, even a little bit of self-awareness going in, your self-awareness could then explode, probably potentially become too self-aware to a certain extent. But then you also, at the very least, I think they have a mirror into other people's lives in a way that they have never had it before. I should say, a window into other people's lives in a way that they've never had it before. So they can be like, oh, this is what it looks like when you're that age and you have these circumstances, at least for what people are portraying online. And I do think that there's a relatively accurate portrayal of like all the glamorous things, but then also just, mundane content, I think, has had like a big boom over the past few years too. So if you're 16 years old and you're able to watch a bunch of content from a person that's like, come with me on my 9 to 5, and they're just have a very normal life and they're, own very normal things, quote unquote, it kind of demystifies how adulting is just this completely different world. So I would agree. I'm also holding out like a little bit of hope and taking a positive spin on where I hope it leads my daughter to and how her friends look at things. But I guess that's my job to help make sure she's got the right kind of confidence to do all that in the right way.
Yeah, that makes sense. You brought up something that triggered a thought of, with all of the world is very different for our kids' age than it was even 20 years ago. Affordability of housing is just massively different in comparison to housing increase compared to average incomes over the last 40 years are just wildly different. And so because of that, there's almost this shift that happens where importance in those things has changed because it's going to be out of reach for a lot of people. They won't have that same opportunity to get real estate as the older generation. And so, but all of a sudden it's almost like there's this freeing moment of, if I don't have to go for the picket fence, what can I go for that's actually going to make me happy? Like, where is the happiness instead of the achievement, or instead of the optics? And so, I don't know, just an observation. I'm sure the economists can give us real answers in that. But what are some of the things from from the perspective of what you're teaching around doing your best work, right? What are some of the lessons that you really want your daughter and her generation to learn?
Oh man. It is an understanding, that your best, I'd say it's two-part. One is that your best is good enough, which is like old and cliche. But what makes that really sit differently is understanding what your best actually is. Right? So actually I'm going to revise it. It's three-part. It's understanding that your best is good enough. If you can understand what your best really is, while making sure that happiness is part of the equation too, right? Because there's like your best relative to what you're striving for, but then there's also that question. And I got this yesterday in Union Square, when someone's like, I'm looking to do these things, and I just had a kid, and blah 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 blah. And like, how do I do? I'm like, well, what do you want? Like, before I answer your question in regards to how to do what you're doing, like, is that even what you want, or have you even defined that yet? Because if you really want to do the thing off your side of the desk while you're doing your day job, while you're being a parent, like, not to be that guy, but like, you wouldn't be the first person to do that. And I guarantee you that there have been thousands of people before you that may not have been as smart, may not have had the same circumstances, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so for my daughter and her peers, and anybody even in that ballpark that I would have a chance to say this to, it's your best is always going to be good enough, because it's all you're capable of. And that's more than fine. But you also have to be comfortable with what that actually means. Right? Some people would be like, well, I'm trying my ass off. And then if they actually like did a calendar audit of where their time is getting spent, is it really? But then also too, like, what's going to make you happy? Right? And if you can take those pieces and put them together, then you have something magical. If it's like, cool, I know that to your earlier point, I love the way you said it. I like saying this too. Like, what is your 100? Like, what is truly your 100 day? Output wise, attitude wise, all the things. What is your 100? Because if you can get to 85% of your 100, 85% of the time, you're going to do gangbusters things. But a lot of people will spend so much time contemplating what good could look like that they never figure out what their 100 is. And then they're kind of stuck in this, like, well, they think that they need to figure something out to then get to their 100 to then make the thing happen. Where I think you need to figure out, well, what am I actually capable of? Where do I actually want to go? Like, what does good look like to me? And then if you can use happiness as a piece of that to make sure that you do it the way that is going to fill your cup, then you've kind of solved almost all of the world's mysteries.
Yeah. The challenge with the idea that your best is good enough is that then people slide the scale down, and they'll say, well, what I am good enough, and what I did today is good enough. But it's like, but was it? Like, are you measuring it against what your best potential was? It doesn't mean you have to reach outside, and it does, but I think it's dangerous when we start having any aspiration, right? When we start striving, but there is compassion and there is empathy along the way, right? It's like, I know what my 100 is, or at least I have an idea. I'm not going to get there most days. And so my daily best is different than my absolute best. But I think what's the dangerous road is when I allow myself to do 50% and say that was okay, but I didn't push, I didn't strive. And I think, this show 16 years ago was started with really on the back of the idea of like what Tim Ferriss teaches about dreamline, where you pick you define your dream life, what you want to do, what you want to be,
Mm-hmm.
what you want to have. And then you put that dream on a timeline. And, but I think so many times people of all ages skip the definition step. And they just
Mm-hmm.
start saying, I'm going to start modeling what I see someone else do. I'm going to start doing what my buddy's doing. And instead of
Mm-hmm.
saying, what is it that I want? What do I want? What does my ideal life look like? Right. And that's like what you
Yep.
just said about that person you ran into. What's yours? What's your big, what's something big that you want to accomplish here in the next 12 months?
Two things. One is a book I've been writing for 3 years now, and finally have a date that it's going to be on shelves that I don't think I've said out loud yet, other than to my wife and like people in my circle. November 10th, it'll be on shelves, and getting that out there and seeing the impact that it can have is one. The second piece is this emotional intelligence school that I've been working on. So as I got these certifications, as and I started to like use this in the real world and realize the impact that it could have, I thought, well, why is this only limited to people that can afford super expensive executive coaches? Like, how can I scale this out? How can I democratize access to this? So I have been working for about a year and a half now on scaling out access to emotional intelligence assessments that are usually just reserved for the C-level folks that can afford those types of coaches and those types of opportunities. And my hope is by the middle of summer, I will have something standing up where people can easily purchase at a reasonable price one of these assessments and then be able to jump into a classroom with me directly. And I can tell them like, cool, this is what your answers told me, right? And do that in large batches of people where it's big enough so that the access can be scalable, but also small enough so it's not just, hey, here's a bunch of video courses with all due respect to those. Like, no, it's like, I'm going to jump on and host these things. So emotional intelligence school, something I've been talking about for a while, but like that's starting to become very real in the build out process. And a book November 10th called How to Get Addicted to Appreciation.
Those are two big things. What about in your personal life? Any non-business things that you really want to do, be, or have, or achieve in the next 12 months?
I am super excited to be in Korea and Japan with my family in June. And then we are going to, for the first time for us as a family, we're going to drive coast to coast. My wife is from Beaverton, Oregon, and we decided this summer, since we have the time, we're going to, instead of just fly out there, like, let's drive, like, extend the trip by 2 or 3 days on the front and the back end, but like, how fun, especially when she's 13 and she's super well traveled at this point, but old enough where she'll probably really soak it in, but not too old where, I don't know, where maybe there's like a bit of like, oh my God, am I really getting dragged into this kind of thing?
Yeah. Not to terrify
so
you,
I would
because
say
you've got like 4 summers, man. And so I love that you're doing
Yeah.
things to really to bake in that deeper connection time, because that's so powerful and so important. And that, beyond anything else that I think going into your business for yourself and entrepreneurship can create, beyond any other success, beyond anything, having the freedom to have the time to spend with the people you want to spend it with is probably its greatest output and its greatest gift. And so I love that you're taking advantage of that. If you're famous everywhere, but if there was one place that you wanted people to go to get to know you a little bit more, where should they go?
I would say Instagram. TikTok is a very different platform these days from when it was when I first started and where things
Sure.
blew up. Instagram is probably where you're going to get the best spread of who I am as a human being on a day-to-day basis, and then what are some of the things that I can do that could add value to your world.
Awesome. So check Timm out. It's Timm Chiusano on TikTok or on Instagram. And Timm, thank you so much for sharing your presence and your information, your insight with us in the world. And to all my biz ninjas, wherever you're tuning in from, watching or listening, it's your turn to go out and do something.